Hi, welcome everybody. This is Arif Nazir with my third episode of my new episode, Dear Children, which is actually based on my dad's autobiography, which was released earlier this year. And we've gone through some amazing initial introduction and first few chapters. But I think today's chapter is an important one for many reasons. But I'm so excited to have the support of my sister Samia, of course, the author's daughter, bringing very important perspective on this chapter, which I think really defined my father in many ways, and maybe many of us through that. This is the chapter which actually takes us through some of the horrible but some of the good news stories that he had and his family had to face while migrating from Faridkot to eventually to other part of the country, which was eventually became Pakistan. So with that, thank you, Samia, for joining us. I know you're visiting from Pakistan on a short trip, and you took the opportunity to come to Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm so happy that you want to do this. I know you're not a very camera savvy person for many reasons you
For
described.
sure.
Why did you agree to do this?
Because I love the passion you have for the book. And the book really needs to go on to as many people as it should. The ones who are not reading it should be benefiting out of something out of it
Yeah.
at least. So that's why we're here.
So thank you, Samia, again. So
Thank you for having me.
and it's very hard to structure this chapter in a perfect way because there's so much in this, right?
Sure.
And Samia and I were talking about this, like how can we make it very meaningful and fun?
Mhm.
Is really to focus on the emotional aspect of it because you just cannot go through an emotional roller coaster with
Exactly.
while you read this
Yeah,
chapter, right?
for sure.
So let me just quickly go some facts and then we'll I want to come to you for your reaction.
Sure.
The reason this chapter becomes doubly important to me or maybe triply important to me because this also makes me think about my own migration from Lahore to USA, which was of course full of fun and celebration excitement, but man, was it a roller coaster of emotions for me. And I always kind of sometimes think about like what if I never migrated, maybe I would have been happier in Pakistan, right? So
Yeah.
those things are there, so it does connect with me in very ways for that
But
reason.
if you allow, I would just add on something here. The age difference that our dad has here, and when you
Yeah,
decided to do it, right? So he was actually put into it. He did not do it on
he didn't
purpose.
opt for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the difference here is it's a basic difference
Yeah.
that you opted and you were always glued to the aim that you have to move mentally.
Yeah.
But he didn't know. And being a child, he was just coming from nowhere when he was announced to move on with his parents and relatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this chapter, we will not only focus on my dad's emotions, which surprisingly you will see were not always of the fear and horror, because he was a kid, a
Yeah.
very few years a young kid. So there was actually some excitement, which is very fascinating to see that as all the older people around him would just look so nervous and fearful, and he later on did talk to them and find out how life-threatening that all was. The kids his age actually did have some excitement about the
Yeah, he
journey
was thrilled as well for the boys.
because yeah, they were all packing up to the big journey and just going somewhere new.
He was 6, I guess.
Yeah,
He's 6,
I think it was
right?
six.
Yeah.
So with the most important emotion he brings up is that how his grandma Nana, he calls her, had to depart from their house where they lived for years and their objects. Every little thing becomes important in this scenario. So that
Nani,
Nani,
she was the main
right,
figure who sacrificed.
and just leaving the objects behind. Not that was the biggest thing in the world, but again, every single thing matters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he starts about that. But again, the kids were overall, through mixed bag of emotions, sometimes joyous. But he specifically talks about a very fond memory is that the guy who was actually driving the Tonga, and they're traditionally called
Yeah,
Coach One,
Mhm.
and he was actually singing a song which was stuck in my dad's head, which is quite cool. And it's basically something like Baba Teri Nagri Si Sukha Mali, which basically in Punjabi means that hey man, I'm leaving this land, but this land was full of peace and love.
Because the Faridkot part of Faridkot, it is actually linked to Baba Farid.
Yes,
So the Baba here is
referring to that, and
yes.
we did talk to our audience about that
Yeah.
connection.
So that's the connection.
But again, even though it was a song, it was very melancholy and sad
Yes,
song. It
it
was
was.
about leaving
Leaving
things
that.
behind, right? And then, as they go through the journey, their intention, just some facts, Samia, was to go from Faridkot to take a train to Kasur,
Yes.
and then from Kasur to go to Montgomery.
Montgomery,
So that was the eventual thing they wanted to do.
yeah.
And the other, the common theme is that how limited food supplies they had. And I
Yes.
think my dad talks about that the value of simple roti, chapati, gur,
Good.
chanas,
Chana.
little things.
Yeah.
Like you and I don't even ever take for granted, right?
Exactly,
Those
for
things.
sure, for sure. And one thing here is important to understand as well. When they were leaving their house, if you notice, Rupi, there was not much that they were leaving behind, right? They
Yeah.
were happy with their very
Yeah.
small territory that they
They
had.
don't have a lot.
Yeah.
They have any expand big screen TVs or
Yeah. So if it is, if it was,
laptops.
if it were us, I mean, it
Oh,
would have been a big deal for us,
oh my
right?
God, yes, exactly. And then there, I quickly want to get to and then get over with the horrendous part of the journey, which my dad was exposed to at the age of 6, and many even more younger kids than him were exposed to, was probably part of any migration is sacrifice people make. And as they, approach the Kasur border, they start
Mm.
seeing in the flood waters of dozens, if not hundreds, of dead bodies
Yes.
floating. I just cannot imagine the pain and the misery they have caused. And my actually father does talk about it. Like that is just
Yeah,
something
that is
very hard
horrendous.
to
Very hard to
get
understand.
through that.
And it actually seems like it stuck to my visual as well. I
Yeah.
have it in my mind. Whenever I talk about Dear Children, that's one of the images that I have.
And my father eloquently says this. It was perplexing and difficult for me to understand why
Mm.
somebody would kill other human beings, particularly
Yeah.
children and infants.
Yeah.
And my point is that actually,
That touches your
unfortunately,
heart.
we see that in the stories even these days. So again, I don't think we have still figured that out,
We haven't. No one can, I guess.
and I hope we can at some point. A very cute part of this story is when the Nani actually offered the food to a family who just had
Yeah,
nothing to eat, right?
that sacrifice.
And let me just quickly read these 5 lines, which are just so well written by
Sure.
my dad, and I
Yeah.
appreciated it. It said, I learned from the event that there is fulfillment and happiness to be found in empathy and compassion, and usually the satisfaction gained from selflessness
Mm.
exceeds what is gained from narrow and selfish action. And I think that describes my parents.
And that is what I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
Because that's how I see him being brought up,
Manifesting himself.
being brought up by him. I could see that very visibly in his personality.
I can see, and thanks to Nani,
Yeah.
through that action, instilled that in my father, and then my father instilled, and my mother also instilled all of that lessons in us
In
as
us as
children.
well, yeah.
And I think we cherish that attribute, and now we know the root of that,
For
Samia.
sure. we
So
do.
that is quite cool to see.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna. There's this exciting and fascinating read through the book. I would highly recommend it, like the scenery and other emotions. But I'm gonna cut through that. And again, my dad talks about the third day through their migration, when they actually were devoid of any food, and actually somebody else gave them some simple chapati,
Chapati.
and he says that chapati had never tasted that good.
That's good, yeah.
And no wonder my dad is so attached to chapati now.
Exactly.
No meal for him,
And
actually.
also think of it, third day means what? I mean,
Yeah, that's
just calculating your
right.
mind, third day,
right.
still traveling through all
Yes.
that agony is
It's,
too much.
it's a big sacrifice. And he talks about that. That's where he learned the value of gratitude.
Mm.
And then I don't want to just not talk about the fact that thousands of people who migrated, again, both sides. I'm not saying this from
Yeah,
people
we have to keep that in mind. for
absolutely,
sure.
the humans are humans, and both sides of the border, people were traveling these trains. Samia, my dad actually gives us this very good visual through his words that people were actually on these fast trains in a very unsafe way on the roofs and the top because there's not enough room.
Yeah.
People were hanging through the windows, through the doors.
Exactly.
Many of them fell through, and then people who were inside were not very comfortable. There was odor,
That's
sweat,
another angle. We could have not thought of that.
the stench, and the anger. What a sacrifice all of them made. And then my father talks about again a life changing experience when he was approaching Montgomery. The amount of folks who died and were passed away or killed was just many more folds, which he had to suffer through and look
Yeah.
at through. And again, he says that it's going to define him forever. And then just the last piece I just want to share, a big one here is Samia, is you and I have heard this story from him himself, but it's very eloquently written in this book. The fact that he actually got off a train, got distracted, and before the train started, he was still on the platform and did not know where he was. And he was 6 years old. And Samia, what happened next?
Nobody had noticed his absence, in fact.
Yeah.
And he was not mindful of that the train could move and just leave him there. But it did move. And then he was, of course, I cannot imagine what emotions would have been run into his mind, right? You tell the next part.
No, but he describes them really well, actually. And then luckily, he had some visual stuck of a bamboo staff,
Yeah.
which was standing by the door because the compartment he was supposed to go back in. Because he could have any other compartment he would have gone into, he would not have found his parents because there were thousands of people in those trains. So he basically says,
It
and,
was
and
just that bamboo stuff that
Yeah.
actually made his life and the future that we were there.
he's basically saying that if that bamboo
Yeah.
staff had not been there, he had not remembered it, or somebody had
Yeah.
removed it, he would have never gotten back to his family. And that would have put him on a whole new trajectory. I don't know he would be living or not, right? Maybe we would have not even born. Who knows? So, but I think I related to it because how many times, not a lot, but few times in my own life, I can actually relate to things where I do actually wake up and say,
Same.
what if? And one of them, Samia, I was sharing with you that in Iraq, when we used to live Basra, when my father used to teach in Basra University when I was a kid, I did get lost and I was 6 years old
Yeah.
myself. And just a very gentle soul found me and did their best to get me to a police station. And the police finally located my parents. And had that not happened to me,
What if he wasn't there and it was someone else, a crooked person?
exactly.
Where would you be?
All of you who are tuned with us today, just a good moment to reflect. What if moments you have seen and how blessed we all have been that through those what if moments,
Yeah,
things happen the right way.
these are the multiple trajectories that could
Could have
happen.
happened.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
thankfully they didn't.
So very interesting. And then again, the story ends, the chapter ends in a very positive way, which I love about this book.
That is quite nice.
Because they basically, at the end of the journey, they saw their relatives with their brimming, smiling faces there
That's
to
the
receive
best
them.
part. I love that too.
And then they collected them all and took them to their house. And eventually, my father and his family got a small house allotted for 14 of them. It's a small house, it's a terrible house, but they just treasured it.
And Rufi, what we have noticed in our dad is the value of relationships.
Yes, yes.
He is very
Thankful.
constant about it, and we can see where.
And then also his urge, we always sometimes laugh about, he wants everybody to be together all the
Yeah,
time,
I
right?
think that comes from some roots as
Which is
well.
very sweet and positive. Of course, it comes with its challenge. We have that too, but he specifically.
Exactly.
And now I understand where does that come in him
Yeah.
from and,
So
and
that's what
why.
I'm saying. It is trickled in us
Because of these
probably
things.
this part.
So it is so cool to see what I am made of through this
Yeah.
book, right? So that's been the benefit of me. But I hope that these things spur in your own mind some of the provoke some thoughts and questions that you can go and ask your parents and grandparents and really reflect on and understand what you are about, right? So
Yeah.
that's the beauty of this book for me.
That's what I wanted to say as well, because the reflection, it sometimes needs a trigger.
Yeah.
So the book is a real trigger for all of you to
And
go
thank-
through the lives, and
Yeah.
thankfully so.
Thanks to my dad, because
Mhm.
without his book, I would probably, I'm so busy all the time in my own stuff and my priorities.
Yeah.
I may not have even reflected on this. So
That
thank
is
you to
true.
Father for doing this. And let me just, Samia, end this and I'll just take your, and we'll end with your
Please.
comments. 20 seconds. I just want to read this, my father's last few lines, which are so precious. He says, "The memories of our journey, the terrifying scenes of violence and bloodshed, persisted in my mind and dreams. For a long while, there was hardly a night that I slept peacefully and without fear, unperturbed by the horrible nightmares of what I had seen as a young child." Sad.
It's very sad. I think we have not gone to any extent of the fear that my dad has crossed through, right? We cannot evaluate this much, but according to the words, we can understand how impactful that was. That the young brain and the young mind and soul, every part of it was disturbed. And I'm sure it's going to be the same for all the people who did migrate to Pakistan or to India.
We have empathy for both folks across the board, both sides of the border. And it
No one
applies to-
deserves this.
It applies to every human being, regardless of which side of the border they were or they are.
And
So-
Rufi, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is not only about one person, right? But it has to be taken as a universal attitude.
Right, exactly. So with that, we're going to end this. I just want to thank you, Samia, again.
Thank you, Rufi, for having me here.
I
And
think
thank you, all of you.
I think she has had an amazing perspective. And again, guys, hopefully you'll learn, get this book, your hand in this book, and if you need one copy, let me know. And we'll be back with episode 4 with a lot of much funner, hopefully, and floral stories than this one. But this was an